Hey, it's Miss Hildreth, and it's day 2 explore. So this is going to be kind of a long video because I actually am going to read and discuss the chapter with you, the section of the chapter. So you can either read it independently on your own to yourself, or you can sit and listen and follow along and listen to me read, which it's totally up to you. But if somebody was reading to me, I would much rather listen and follow along, especially when I have to pay attention for like main idea and details. So here's our agenda for today. Number 1, students will watch a YouTube video and read the chapter 1, unit 1, the rise of Greek civilization. So we're getting into the meat. We're going to find out about ancient Greece. Now that we've learned vocabulary and geography and peninsulas, and we know that there's mountains and we know what the climate's like. So, number 2, then the students will fill out slides 6 through 9. They will identify the central idea of the subsection and give 3 important details that support the main idea. So, number 1, watch the video of a reading and discussion of the text. And I will place the video link in shortly once I finish this video. And then number 2, scroll down to slides 6 through 9 and complete the graphic organizers. Click on the text box and then they can begin typing. So I'm going to show you that first. So here's the text box. So it says this section is mainly about. So your subsections are going, or your main ideas are going to be the title of your subsections. So our first one is going to be Greece's geographic setting. We're just going to type that in the box. And then, we're going to read that section, and you can go section by section, or if you want to read everything. Me personally, I would read a section, pause, go through, figure out the details that I need to include, because you need to include 3 important details that you think support that main idea and that you think really kind of sum up what that subsection is about. Okay, so I'm going to go back up to my slide 5, and it says article link. So I'm going to click on it, and it's going to take me to DocHub. Hopefully it'll take me to DocHub. And let me get rid of that. Okay, it'll take a minute to load. Great, it loaded quick today. So if you look, this is the actual subsection that I would give you in a paper copy format, but we're going to do it digitally. So the first page is kind of hard to read, but this is actually Greece. This is Asia Minor. This is Crete and Knossos, which you should have remember from our get to know Greece geography. Here's the Aegean Sea. This is the Mediterranean Sea, so there's a little bit of a recap. You can see there's lots of mountains. Okay, so this is the rise of Greek civilization. Now, if you remember, I went over the learning targets on day 1, and I took them right from these objectives, so I'm not going to go over them again, okay? Here's your vocab words. They should look familiar, like peninsula and democracy and tyrant and aristocrat. So let's get started. First, there was nothing. Then came Mother Earth. The gods of night and day appeared next, and then the starry sky. Earth and sky created the 12 titans. These great gods rebelled against their father, Sky, and took away his power. The youngest of the titans, Kronos, ruled in his father's place. In time, Kronos had 6 children. The youngest, mighty Zeus, toppled Kronos from his throne. With such stories, the people of ancient Greece described the struggles of their gods. Like their gods, the people of Greece had to struggle for power and independence. Their struggles began with the land itself. Okay, so there's kind of a clue, or this was kind of an introduction, gave us a little bit of a history of ancient Greece and kind of related it to Greek mythology. Okay, so our first subsection, which we typed in I typed in for you, is Greece's geographic setting. The land of Greece looks as if the sea had smashed it to pieces. Some pieces had drifted away to form small, rocky islands. Others barely cling to the mainland. Greece is a country made up of peninsulas. A peninsula is an area of land surrounded by water on three sides. Look at the map titled Ancient Greece. As you can see, no part of Greece is very far from the sea. So if we scroll back up and we look at the map, right? Here's Greece. There's water here, there's water here, there's water here, there's water everywhere, right? Even down on Crete, even on the island of Crete, we have the Mediterranean Sea. Mountains are the major landform of Greece. Greece's islands are mostly mountain peaks. Mountains wrinkle the mainland, so there are only a few patches of farmland. So think about that because we're going to talk about the economy in more depth probably later next week. So that gives you kind of a clue, right? Only about 1/5 of Greece is good for growing crops. No wonder the Greeks became traders and sailors. At times, they left Greece to found colonies far away. What was life like for people living in Greece 3,000 years ago? In a way, the ancient Greeks were all islanders. Some lived on real islands, completely surrounded by water, or small peninsulas. Others lived on what could be thought of as land islands. Instead of water, mountains separated these small communities from one another. The geography of Greece made it hard for people from different communities to get together. So here's some clues, right? Difficult, very challenging with what types of jobs they could have. Travel, visiting people could be a challenge. So, and it didn't necessarily just have to be water, mountains were a big challenge too. For this reason, it is no surprise that ancient Greek communities thought of themselves as separate countries. Each one developed its own customs and beliefs. Each believed its own land, traditions, and way of life were the best, and each was more than ready to go to war or to protect itself. In fact, for most of history, the Greeks were so busy fighting among themselves that it is easy to forget that they shared a common heritage, spoke the same language, and worshiped the same gods. Now, you can choose to continue to read on, which I'm going to go on in just a minute. But if I were you, I would stop. I would come back over here. I would go to this first section and I would pick my three important details, right? So, what do you think an important detail is? I would say, and these don't necessarily have to be in complete sentences, but you need to give enough detail. So one important detail that I wrote was made up of peninsulas and had mountains, because that's really important, right? It tells us how they affected their lives. Could they travel very easily? Where did they settle? How did they take care of themselves? How did they visit their family members if they didn't all live in the same community? So that's one important fact. And if you want to use that as a detail in the box, go right ahead. And then you'll just have to come up with two more. Okay, so we're going to move on. And our second section is Greek beginnings. Now, when it comes to dividing these up, you're going to actually have the Minoan civilization as one subsection, and you'll have a box, and you'll put this section is mainly about the Minoans. This, and then you'll have another box, and it'll say this section is mainly about the Mycenaeans. So, okay, so we talked about what it was like geographically. Now we're going to talk about the actual people. So, Greek beginnings. Early Greek civilization arose on and off the Greek mainland. Two ancient peoples, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, made an important impact on Greek history. From about 3000 to 1100 BC, Bronze Age people called Minoans lived on the island of Crete. Washed by the waters of the Aegean and the Mediterranean seas, Crete was an ideal place for the Minoans to develop a broad sea trade network. Mainland Greece and other Greek islands, as well as Egypt and Sicily, traded with the Minoans, who at one time dominated the Aegean Sea. Archaeological finds show that the Minoans had developed a vibrant culture. Samples of the Minoan writing have been found, on thousands of clay tablets. A grand palace stood in one ancient Crete city, Knossos. Palace ruins hint at rooms once covered with fanciful wall paintings. Various statues found within suggest that the Minoans worshipped goddesses. In the middle of the 1400s BC, Knossos was destroyed and the Minoan civilization declined. People from mainland Greece, the Mycenaeans, were likely the invaders. Okay, now I just want to give you a little hint about that. The Minoans were more passive. They were into trading. They were into taking care of themselves and providing for themselves. The Mycenaeans were a little bit different. Okay, and the hint was they think that they came from the mainland and they destroyed Knossos. So that kind of tells you what kind of people and how they were different. So after the Mycenaeans came into power, mainland and island cultures blended. However, the focus of the cultures moved to the mainland, where the city of Mycenae was located. At the height of their power, around 1400 BC, the Mycenaeans controlled the Aegean Sea and parts of the Mediterranean. Like the Minoans, the Mycenaeans also used writing. Studies of the Mycenaean script show they spoke an early form of modern Greek. The Minoans had gained much of their power through trade. Although the Mycenaeans traded widely, they relied upon conquest to spread their power. So there's my clue. They weren't this is my take. They weren't as, I don't want to say passive was the Minoans, but I feel like they were a group of people that got along with people and weren't very aggressive. Whereas the Mycenaeans, I think they were a group of people that if they wanted something, they were going to take it and it didn't matter if they hurt someone. So this leads us into the Trojan War. Okay, and we're going to learn more about the Trojan War. We're actually going to do watch a video, and we're going to do an escape room next week. So I'm really kind of excited about doing that. So let's get a little background information though. So let me stop real quick. Before you go on to the Trojan War, you should have a section on the Minoan civilization, and you should have a section on the Mycenaeans. So those will be 2 more boxes. You'll need 3 details for that. Okay, moving on. The Trojan War. Greek myth tells the story of the Trojan War, a long struggle between Greece and the city of Troy on the west coast of the Asian Minor in present-day Turkey. It's possible that Mycenaean warriors inspired this legend. According to the myths, Greeks conquered Troy by using a trick, the Trojan horse. Greek warriors hid inside a huge wooden horse, and the horse rolled to the city gates. Thinking it was a gift, the Trojans brought the horse into their city. Why wouldn't they, right? During the night, though, the Greek soldiers climbed out of the horse and let the rest of their army into Troy. Wouldn't do that again, right? The Greeks burned and looted Troy and then returned home. So, what happened after this, right? 2 epics or long storytelling poems about the Trojan War survive today. They are the Iliad and the Odyssey. These epics may have been composed by many people, but they are accredited to a poet called Homer. The poems were important to the Greeks. They taught them what their gods were like and how the noblest of their heroes behaved. Today, people think these poems came from stories memorized by several poets and passed down from word of mouth through many generations. Homer may have been the last and the greatest in this line of poets who told about the Trojan War. Most historians agree that the Trojan War didn't happen exactly as Homer described it. Of course, if you're passing a story on, it's kind of like the telephone game, right? If I tell you something, by the time it gets around school, if people talk, it always has a little bit different version from what I said to begin with, right? Same with Homer. Some believe that Homer's epics were inspired by a long battle between the Greeks and the Trojans, but others argue that the epics were inspired by a series of minor battles. Troy was destroyed by a large fire in the mid 1200 BC, and act that some historians believe may have been committed by the invaders from Greece. So that gives you a little insight on the Trojan War. We're going to find out a little bit more about it. But this is another section. So you're going to go to your graphic organizer. You're going to write Trojan War, give me 3 details, and then you can move on to the next subsection. So we're going to move on. And the Dark Ages of Greece, which kind of I will talk about. I use this actually in my video for day 3. So after the Trojan War, what was life like? Was it all roses? Was it peachy? Not necessarily. Not long after the end of the Trojan War, civilization in Greece collapsed. No one knows exactly why. Life went on, but poverty was everywhere. People no longer traded for food and other goods beyond Greece. They had to depend on what they could raise themselves. Some were forced to move to islands and to the western part of Asia Minor. They were so concerned with survival that they forgot about the art of writing. There wasn't really time to enjoy life because they were focused on taking care of themselves and making sure that they were fed, clothed, right? They needed housing. These years from the early 1100s to 750 BC have been called Greece's Dark Ages. Without writing, people had to depend on word of mouth to keep their traditions and history alive. Old traditions were remembered only in the myths that they were told and retold. Greek's Dark Ages were not completely bleak, so it wasn't a total, I don't want to say disaster or bad time, but there was some good that came out of it. During this time, families gradually began to resettle in places where they could grow crops and they could raise animals. Some of these family farms may have developed into villages. When they chose where to build their farms, people favored places near rocky, protected hills. Here they built structures to protect them from attack. The name for such a fortified hill was an acropolis, meaning a high city. After 800 BC, people in Greece began writing again. It was during the period that Homer is believed to have composed his epic about the Trojan War. So every society, every civilization, if we think about it, has gone through what we would consider they called the Dark Ages, right? It's a downturn. It's people struggle, the economy or how they provide for themselves isn't doing well. We've had these issues in modern day America, right? So, what came out of it? Well, there was farming. They did provide for their families, and because of this downturn, they were able to move and they founded the Acropolis. All right, so there is another section, the Dark Ages. So please go to your graphic organizer or wait till the end and then come up with your 3 details. I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. But the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was the largest of all Greek buildings. The temple was considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. In 1869, British archaeologist John Turtlewood uncovered the remains of the temple. His discovery marked the first time an ancient Greek site had been excavated or uncovered. Ancient Greeks worshiped Artemis as the goddess of the wild animals and hunt. So Greek mythology was a big thing. The arts was a big thing. Theater was a big thing. And this is just one picture. And they would be outside for plays and things like that. So, city states. Now we're moving on. We've talked about city states. You should know the vocabulary. So, what's a city state and how did they develop? Historians believe. Now, if you remember in our Newsela article, it kind of talked about it a little. So, you had a little bit of background information from Newsela too. Historians believe that sometime around 750 BC, villages in a small area probably joined to form a city in the shadow of an acropolis. At that time, each city began to develop its own traditions and its own form of government and laws. Today, we call these tiny nations city-states. A city-state is not only a city, but also a separate, independent state. Each city-state included a city and the villages and fields surrounding it. Hundreds of Greek city-states grew up, each more or less independent. So, guys and ladies, this is another subsection. I would say, I'm going to give you a freebie here, but I would say I would make sure that I mentioned included cities, villages, and the fields surrounding it. I think that's really important. And I think also, here's another clue for you if you watch the video, developed its own traditions, form of government, and laws. So even though everybody was living in Greece, think about it like modern day, right? So our city states of ancient Greece are kind of like the states, right? In the state of Ohio, we have different laws than maybe the state of Michigan or the state of Tennessee, speed limits, things like that. So if you think about it, everything comes from somewhere, right? In history. So think about a city state and think about our modern day states. Okay, aristocracy, nobles rule. The earliest rulers of city states were probably chieftains or kings who were military leaders. By the end of Greece's Dark Ages, most city states were ruled by aristocrats. What's an aristocrat? Not aristocrats. Aristocrats, members of rich and powerful families. Aristocrats controlled most of the land. They could afford horses, chariots, and the best weapons to make themselves stronger than others. So, aristocracy, that is another subsection. So, a new type of ruler. So, did the aristocrats stay forever? Of course not. Nothing lasts forever, right? So, we had a new type of ruler. As the Greeks sailed to foreign ports, trading olive oil, marble, and other products, the city states became richer. Of course, they're making money, right? So, a middle class of merchants and artisans developed. They wanted more say in the government of their cities. These people could not afford to equip themselves with horses and chariots for war. However, they could afford armor, swords, and spears. With these weapons, large groups of soldiers could fight effectively on foot. Gradually, military strength in cities shifted from the aristocrats to merchants and artisans. As a result of these changes, aristocratic governments were often overthrown and replaced by rulers called tyrants. Now, we talked about a tyrant, and a tyrant, whenever you hear that word, it gives me like a little bit of a cringe because it sounds like this mean, cruel person that's like abusive and things like that. Now, were they? Some were, some may not. I think as time went on, they got more of a bad reputation and they started treating their people more cruel. So, tyrants were usually supported by the middle and the working classes. Today, we think of tyrants being cruel and violent. That was true of some Greek tyrants, but others ruled wisely and well. So, it just depended on who your ruler was. Okay, our last section. I know this video is kind of long. So, democracy. So, we went from an aristocracy to a tyrant to now it's democracy. Let's see if it's like modern day. Eventually, the people of many city-states overthrew the tyrants. Some of the cities adopted a form of government called democracy. In a democracy, citizens govern themselves. The city-state in which democracy was most fully expressed was Athens, of course. About 594 BC, a wise Athenian leader called Solon won the power to reform laws. Solon was well known for his fairness, which is a good thing because a lot of the rulers back then didn't necessarily, by choice, depending on who your ruler was, wasn't always fair. His laws reformed both the economy and the government of Athens. One of his first laws canceled all debts and freed citizens who had been enslaved for having debts. Another law allowed any male citizen of Athens aged 18 or older to have a say in debating important laws. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? These laws and others allowed Athens to become a leading democracy in the ancient world. Not everyone living in ancient Athens benefited from the democracy. So it wasn't always a good thing. Think about early modern America and think about how women and how the slaves were treated here and think about what we just read about. Because that's one of our learning targets, remember? Only about 1 in 5 Athenians was a citizen. To be a citizen, a man had to have an Athenian father and mother. Some of the people living in Athens were enslaved. These people did not take part in the democracy, nor did women or men with non citizen parents. Men who were citizens of Athens and were free and self governed. Okay, so this is a little bit, that's our section 1. Okay, so think about it. Was Athens the form of democracy? Was it really fair? Think about all of the things that you had to be able to participate in the democracy. And then think about early America, right? Were women always allowed or given the right to vote here? Were slaves allowed to vote? So there's some similarities, isn't it, as we're thinking? So let me just go through, and I'm going to just one last thing, and then I'm going to jump off of here. I know this video is pretty long, but your subsections that you should have on your graphic organizer. Number 1, Greece's geographic setting. Number 2, Minoans. Oops, sorry, I was trying to, and I'm going fast. Minoan civilization. Number 3, the Mycenaeans. Number 4, the Trojan War. Number 5, the Dark Ages. Number 6, the city-states. Number 7, aristocracy. Number 8, the new ruler, a new type of ruler, and that was tyrant. And then our last section should be democracy in Greece. Okay, so you should have 9 subsections. So you're going to fill out. So we're going to go back over here. I'm just going to go through this real quick. You're going to have 9 of these boxes filled out, and you're going to have 3 important details that support that main idea, which is the title of the subsection. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, email me, ask in class. I think this does a really good job. I hope this helps you. If you watch the video and you tell me the one place that you would love to travel to, or if you're a homebody, say I'm a homebody and I don't want to go anywhere, you will receive 1 shield. I'll make it 2 shields. So, because this was a pretty long video. So have a great day. Hopefully this helps you. And like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I will talk to you soon.